It's 11:15. I'm Steve Shenevy, the Fox 5 newsroom. We'll get back to Lion Lunch Hour in just a minute, but first wanted to bring you this breaking news. First on Fox 5 and just into the Fox 5 newsroom, we do have a sentence for Real Housewife of Potomac star Karen Huger, just now sentenced to 1 year in jail. Prosecutors have been looking for a 2-year sentence with all but 6 months suspended. In this case, the judge made a different decision, deciding that Karen Huger should go to jail for 1 year. Now, this all goes back to the accident in which she was ultimately convicted of DUI. That accident happening in Montgomery County last year, just about 1 year ago. And then, of course, she took this to trial and was convicted in December of last year. So a few months ago, today was sentencing day. And again, that sentence coming down just a short time ago, 1 year in prison for Real Housewives of Potomac star Karen Huger. Now, Bob Barnett has been in the courtroom. We're going to check in with Bob in just a few minutes. We'll find out more as to what actually happened and transpired inside of that courtroom. Bob said it was a very, very busy place. There were a lot of people there with a sentencing. You will typically have people that will make the victim impact statements. You will hear from people on both sides who are essentially speaking on behalf of the person who was about to be sentenced. We don't know at this point until we hear from Bob if any of her castmates were there speaking on her behalf or not. We'll get all that information for you shortly. But we also know that prosecutors had been pushing the fact that she had 3 prior DUI cases in her lifetime. That's why they were pushing for at least some jail time in this case and not the full sentence to be suspended. So again, at this point, what we know from the court is that the actual jail time is said to be a 1-year sentence in jail. Waiting for the rest of the details as to whether the sentence was longer than that, with some of that time period suspended or not. You're taking a look right there on the bottom of your screen. That is the front door to the Montgomery County Courthouse in Rockville. I can let you know from what we were hearing from our reporting earlier today, there had been some question when she first arrived at court. Would she try to have a little attention, go in through the doors, have the cameras rolling, that type of thing? That did not happen. Some speculating maybe the entrance in itself, the appearance, would be part of a through line, perhaps on Real Housewives. That did not happen. Essentially, she was able to go into the courthouse through a back entrance. There no fanfare, anything like that, no cameras. Just was able to essentially sneak into the courtroom that way, as we kind of keep an eye on the door there to see if anybody is coming in or out at this point, as we wait to hear more details from Bob as well. But that is what we know right now as far as the potential, well, it would be the sentence at this point after the conviction a little more than 2 months ago in December in Montgomery County. Some of the folks who are coming in and out of court, just to keep in mind, this has nothing to do with her case in a lot of measures. She was not the only person who had a sentencing hearing today in Montgomery County. So we're going to get Bob coming in just a few minutes, and we'll catch up with Bob as soon as we do hear from him, and we get a little more information again as to who was in the courtroom, who was perhaps giving that victim impact statement. Well, it wouldn't even be the victim impact statement, but for the persons who was being sentenced at this point, and we can find out a little bit more. So he's coming out of the courthouse right now. We'll give him a second to get situated. But again, there you see on the big screen, this is some of the also exclusive video that we had from the arrest as she crashed her Maserati in Montgomery County just about a year ago. This was last March of 2024. And again, that is what led the case to go to trial. Some saying, question that decision in itself as to whether to take a plea or go to trial. She decided to take this to trial. Of course, that ended up with a conviction. And then after the conviction in December, they set today as the sentencing date. It was a fairly long court appearance today, but the end result is 1 year in prison for Real Housewives of Potomac star Karen Huger. Bob's outside the courtroom right now, outside of the courthouse. He's made his way out of the courtroom, so let's check back in with him now and find out a little bit more. And Bob, we were just curious as to, the proceeding itself, what played out in court, how many people were in there, who was it that may have made a statement on her behalf at the hearing, and if any of her castmates were in the courtroom.
Yeah, Steve, one of her castmates, the daughter of Chuck Brown, was there. I spoke to her on the way up. She did not testify. The only person who actually testified besides Karen Huger was her husband, Raymond, who, I've got tons of notes, so I'm not going to try to read them here, but I will just kind of paraphrase, just saying that, she was a good person, worked hard in recent weeks to try to make good on what happened in March of last year. Karen Huger herself, before the sentencing, told the judge she was sorry, that this was a wake-up call, that she was going to try to work hard on her sobriety, attend AA meetings for the rest of her life, and be an advocate for, promoting people not to drink and drive. The state had asked for 2 years of incarceration, suspending all but 6 months. But Judge Terrence McGann, he listened and seemed open to the arguments that Ms. Huger's attorney was making, but at the end basically laid down the law. He blasted the guidelines that the state and the judicial system here are kind of operating under, thinking that the punishment should have been more. They were very careful. Someone at one point was blogging on Reddit, so they told everybody, you've got to shut off your phones. I didn't turn mine off. I made sure it was silent. So that's when, as soon as the judge said, I'm not going to follow the state's recommendation, I'll sentence you to 2 years in incarceration, suspending all but 1 year. That the state was looking for 6 months in jail. He said, no, it's going to be a year. He said, you've had 4 offenses in the last 17 years. What are we waiting for the 5th before we actually sentence you to jail time? So as soon as they announced that it was 1 year in jail, I was able to sneak out a text to our producers. But we really stayed there for the rest of the way to see kind of what else was imposed. And there's something like $2,900 in fines and 5 years of probation once she serves a year in jail or prison. They were talking about her serving her time behind bars here in Montgomery County, but that after she gets out after 1 year, she'll not be able to drive a car at all for another year. And then when she is allowed, obviously not to drive after drinking alcohol, and that she'll need an interlock device, which is something that her attorney was offering up right away, saying that if they could see it to either have her on home detention or just on probation, that she already was willing to install those interlocking devices and attend regular AA meetings. In terms of like her reaction, not too much. When her husband Ray stood up behind her to offer testimony to the judge, she kind of looked ahead, didn't seem to acknowledge him, and then at one point was wiping away tears, and then did look back at him before he sat down. It was a packed courtroom. There's a very large courtroom here at the Circuit Courthouse here in Rockville, which a lot of big cases usually have. This was in a smaller courtroom on the 8th floor, but it was packed. The judge allowed people to stand. John McCarthy, the state's attorney, who we'll hopefully hear from at some point, was actually sitting in a folding chair in the center aisle with other people. So it was a packed courtroom. No real audible reaction when the judge, harshly sentenced Karen Huger to 1 year in jail, and she didn't really react either. Steve, and I had a chance, as I was walking out here, one of the jurors, a jury found her guilty back in December of driving under the influence of alcohol. She didn't want to go on camera, but said she was actually surprised by this verdict, had told me that was not really expecting the judge to come down as hard as he did. Again, his demeanor throughout, before he started talking, was very casual and cordial, and then he seemed visibly angry. And I have quotes in here. If you give me a second, some of the things that the judge said in imposing the sentence, were really harsh. There's all the details of the sentence. If you give me 1 second, he did mention, that there was some talk about her blaming her accident in March in Potomac on the fact that she had mixed anti-anxiety and antidepressive medications with alcohol. The judge said, you were filled to the gills with alcohol. And he blasted her for her behavior at the time of her arrest in scolding the officers. Before the sentencing, her attorney handed the judge 3 one-page letters that she wrote to each of the 3 officers who were on the scene last March 19th, right before midnight, apologizing for her behavior that night and thanking them for their service. Steve?
Just to follow up on Bob, one, you mentioned the possibility of her serving the sentence in Montgomery County. Did the judge give any further instructions as to where this sentence should be carried out? And second of all, does it start right away?
It does start right away. I spoke to John McCarthy as we were leaving the courtroom, because I wanted to get out here, and the judge dismissed everyone, but she was still standing there at the defense table. And I asked John McCarthy, does this jail sentence, whatever you want to call it, jail prison sentence, begin right away? And he said, oh yeah, it starts today. So she's going right to jail. And the judge mentioned, he didn't say like the Montgomery County Jail, Montgomery County Adult Detention Center. He said something about, you'll serve this in the state of Maryland, something, something, and then he said here in Montgomery County. So she is going to be, in a sense, a prisoner of the state of Maryland, but serve that, I can only presume, at the jail up in Clarksburg.
All right, we will find out. Bob Barnard, thank you very much. Appreciate your coverage, rushing out of the courtroom to bring us the latest information inside the courtroom as Real Housewives of Potomac star the Grande Dame sentenced to 1 year in prison. It was a 2-year sentence for Karen Huger, 1 year suspended. As Bob mentioned, after that, another year of not driving, a 5-year probation at the end of that sentence as well. So big news coming out of the Montgomery County courtroom this morning when it comes to the Real Housewives of Potomac star Karen Huger. We'll keep you posted throughout the rest of the day today as we learn more information, more details, any new developments. But for now, she's on her way to jail, and we're on our way to break. We'll see you after this.